I'm Alison Dittman. It's really, really nice to meet all of you. And I think now that we have 81 people who've signed up, I think I can do a proper introduction without having to repeat it a lot. So it's really, really nice to see so many new and so many familiar faces here already. Welcome to the Foresight HiveMind. So in the past 5 weeks, we've been doing daily online salons, sometimes twice a day, on trying to make sense of COVID-19, trying to kind of like show people a possible way out and trying to see whether there's long-term opportunities for change. What we're doing now is we're taking it one step further in the next 3 weeks, and it's going to be quite an action-oriented workshop where we basically took the best ideas that popped out over those 5 weeks, and now we wrap them into kind of like specific focus areas shared across 3 weeks. And I think Lou may have already shared a few ways, a few links that you should really, really, really be up to speed on and to be able to collaborate further. But if there's one thing you do, then it's join the Google group, because in the Google group, we can update you on anything that's evolving, because honestly, we're figuring this out. We're learning by doing. The first kickoff salon on Saturday had so many participants that it broke our Zoom capacity. Now we stocked up and we should be fine until 500, but let's see. So this is great, but definitely be proactive and be patient with us. We are just trying to figure this out and experimenting with it. And it's been a really, really steep learning curve already. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen to just quickly tell you about, for those who weren't able to join in the past 2 weeks, what we can expect in the next 3 weeks. Share screen. Tack, tack. Okay, so this is the program that doesn't look pretty, but it's quite useful. So on that program, for anyone that hasn't been here in the introductory session, this is the program for the next 3 weeks. Today we're in the Monday slot. And I think, well, let me just share the program with you, or Lou can maybe share the program once more so you can follow up as we go. But this is the program, this is the HiveMind program, the outline. We are now in the Monday section, and we're going to go through week by week. Week number 1, we're going to focus all on cultivating a humane long-term culture. So we're going to talk about more the vision aspect of this. Week 2, we're going to talk about advancing high impact science and technology. So which opportunity in high impact science and technology can we push for now that would make beneficial futures more likely? Week number 3, we're going to talk about how can we strengthen resilient and cooperative global systems. So there we're going to take it like one Zoom layer out, and we're always going to have one screening question and a few panelists that are there to kind of like guide the way and to make things very concrete, because we've done a lot of talking now. It would be amazing if we could kind of like flip into more of an action mode. And we're going to start with this today. All right, if you want to follow up on what we did over the past 5 weeks, a lot, here are all of the salons, 5 weeks worth of salons, plus all of their videos linked to from the spreadsheet. So feel free to get up to speed. It will only cost you a few weeks, maybe. Hopefully we can really keep this going throughout the year. And then another thing on the collaboration tab, people have already introduced themselves on the collaboration tab, and we are now at, oh my God, wow. We are at 95 people who've already introduced themselves, shared what they're working on, linked to relevant work, what they need, how they can help this community, and then also a bit of hope. Please share a bit of hope. I know sharing a hopeful item that makes you optimistic about the future, sharing that in a spreadsheet column is a little antithetical, but we're hoping that at the end of each salon we can get to those and help all of you guys share a little bit more. All right, great. So I'm going to stop sharing now. Sharing was a good idea, because we're going to dive right into today's topic, number 1. And for that one, I'm going to ask you on the HiveMind to open up on the Monday section, go to the collaborative notes section, open up that Google Doc, and maybe Lou can share it again in the screen, in the chat. If you open that one up, you will get directed to our collaborative notes doc. And this is a doc that I've already sent around to the Google group yesterday, and so many of you have already taken notes on that, and I really thank you for it. I really had watery eyes this morning upon reading some of your suggestions and some of your answers. So what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about what hopeful long-term views for humanity can be birthed from this crisis. So this is like a very kind of zooming out vision setting aspect of this whole workshop. And we have a few fantastic panelists here. I'm still in awe and kind of shocked that they all accepted the invitation. So we have Max Tegmark over here from the Future of Life Institute, published a fantastic book, Life 3.0, which I'm hoping we're going to get into a little bit. Then we have Eri Gentry from Negative here. And yeah, she has been at Institute for the Future for a while and is now starting this super actionable project, and a lot of COVID projects too I've seen. So I'm hoping we can touch on those too. We have Sandberg here from the Future of Humanity Institute, my personal hero. I think, David Pearce introduced him yesterday as someone with a very high hedonic set point. And I think that's very true. It's always a real pleasure to have you. We have David Eagleman from LiveWired, who is publishing. I mean, I went on David's website the other day, and you're really publishing like one book after the other. So it's quite quite impressive to see. And the new book is LiveWired, which I put on there. I don't actually know really yet what it's about. I'm hoping maybe you can tell us a little bit about this. And then we have David Pearce here on the Hedonistic imperative, and who wrote a fantastic book on how we can get better hedonic set points, basically. And all right, so we're gonna, I think, talk a little bit about those, about the visions that are in all of those books in a second. For now, I've added a few hopeful blips that always give me a bunch of hope when I'm in a downer moment. And a few of them are like by David Pearce. There's one from the Hedonistic imperative, and then there's one by Max Tegmark. Feel free to read those. I'm not going to read them out because we actually have those people here. So I will talk less and want them to talk more. But if you do want more, there is the website Existential Hope, on which I'm collecting a bunch of those visions that I think are quite inspirational, especially for the next generation. That website is supposed to be an onboarding document to onboard the next generation and make them feel kind of like bought in and show them potential positive futures. Okay, great. So what we're going to do today is, rather than just talking about ways to disseminate more hopeful visions, for humanity in this challenging time, we're actually going to get right into it. So what we're going to do now in the remainder of the time is I'm going to ask a few questions, and they're already on the doc, to our panelists. And the hope is that we, can maybe produce sound bites or video bites out of this that, are actually uplifting for the folks and can produce maybe like a somewhat more of a cooperative, positive, empowering narrative for this crisis out. And I welcome every one of you, and many of you have done so already, to fill in your answers and to fill in your name, so we can take one of you as well after the panelists answered the questions. And yeah, if you're interested in speaking and contributing to the time to the sound bites, then I have a few suggestions already here. But also feel free to use the chat and just answer the question in the chat. Maybe Luke can ask the question in the chat, you answer, and then we take maybe one or two of you as well. Okay, man, I've talked a lot, but I'm happy to hopefully have onboarded many of you. For now, again, I'm incredibly honored to have such a fantastic panel here. And we're going to dive right into the questions for now. I think that, whenever I meet people like our panelists, I ask myself, have they always been that way? Or was there a particular moment in time that tipped them into the fantastic person with this incredible vision that they are? And so I would love to hear from our panelists, and I'll unmute you, and then I'll give you the opportunity to unmute yourselves as well, one by one, on what moment inspired you for beneficial futures? What made you see that more is possible for humanity? Was this a book? Was this a conversation? Was this entering a community? And I will unmute. Let's see. Who do we have here? David Eagleman. Great, I found you. David, I will unmute you now. So if you would like to share your answer to that question, it would be fantastic. Welcome, David.
Thanks, Alison. Thanks for organizing this. I just want to make sure I understood the question correctly. I assumed when I read it that it meant what moment in the last 5 weeks has inspired us. Is that right?
Or it could be either or. Like this one was more like generally, like how did you become the person that you are with this super ambitious, positive long-term vision? And we're going to talk about the crisis in a second too. But if there's things that are that inspired you in the crisis, that's also always appropriate.
Oh yeah, I mean, how I became who I am, who knows? It's one of the, all the stories we tell about our own lives are always made up in retrospect. So that we can provide some clear narrative. So I have no idea to that, but I can tell you what I think about what moment has inspired me in the last 5 weeks. If that's not too early, maybe I should wait for the other panelists to go.
Go for it.
To my mind, so my interest is, so I'm a neuroscientist and my interest is in brain plasticity, and the last 5 weeks for the world has been as good for brain plasticity as, picking up a new musical instrument or doing any kind of new activity where you challenge your brain in some way. And so what I have seen all around me are these moments of incredible creativity and people demolishing their internal models of how the world is supposed to be working and coming up with new ways of doing things. So all around we've seen creativity, we've seen that creativity rallied towards doing things that are community oriented. And then the only other thing I'd say is that just personally, it's been so nice to see neighborhoods move from backyards to front yards. So those are my inspiring moments in the last few weeks.
From backyards to front yards. I love that. Yeah, it's that's a good one. I think, okay, thank you so much, David. We're going to give it up to Max, and I'm going to unmute you now. Welcome, Max. How are you doing? And what made you into this fantastic person who can come up with a book like Life 3.0?
Thank you for having me on here in this fascinating conversation. It's great to see you and to see so many other old friends here. Hi to you. You know who you are. I think my cheerful disposition is probably partly just dumb luck because I inherited the cheerful gene, and maybe David Eagleman can explain the details of how that works. Probably also partly just because of my general outlook on life. I, as a physicist, spends a lot of time thinking about bigger questions. I think of myself as this blob of quarks and electrons who, for no doing of my own, has been so incredibly fortunate to be arranged in a way that I can have these awesome conscious experiences. And I've also had the fortune to learn, right, as we all have, that even though we used to think many generations ago that we couldn't have so much impact on the distant future. In the Stone Age, pretty much everyone who thought about it was pretty convinced that the standard of living was going to be the same 500 years later. That it's not true at all. That intelligence itself that we have, it has the potential to, just as it's transformed Earth entirely, more than doubled our life expectancy and made our civilization what it is today, that it has this potential to transform much of our universe also, to come alive and be ever more awesome. So this knowledge that we have so much more potential than we think tends to make me pretty cheerful. But of course, I'm not some sort of head in the clouds kind of guy who just thinks that everything is going to be great automatically. I'm a firm believer that we have to really work hard for it to happen. I think and hope that one good thing that will come out of the COVID-19 pandemic is that we will realize what so many of you on the call have been saying for so long, which is that humanity is much less resilient than we thought. And we really want our civilization to be resilient and be able to handle things like the next pandemic and a lot worse things. And we also, I hope this will be sort of a wake-up call. I hope you guys who have been saying this for a long time don't all just go and gloat too much and say, yeah, we told you so. So people get pissed at you. But I hope you can convey the same thing in a more diplomatic way so that people realize that, hey, we really do need to spend a bit more time thinking about the big questions. How do we make ourselves more resilient for the next pandemic, towards accidental nuclear war, towards unaligned artificial general intelligence, towards all sorts of other things, so that we can actually realize all these amazing future opportunities we have, instead of just flaming out and going extinct because of lack of preparation.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, it's so interesting because, like I framed the question as like, humanity that for the first time ever has to coordinate on a common thread. But obviously it's not the first time ever that it has to. It's just the first time that people see it, right? There, like you mentioned, like artificial general intelligence, there's climate change that's like, like this kind of like slowly, advancing catastrophe. So I think it's just the first that we see. And maybe, after this one, we can just keep going. So I'm hoping that, we'll go out of this a little stronger. Is there any book or any narrative or anything that you would point people to that are quite opening in terms of like, what's possible for humanity? Like, was there one in your when you were younger that really did it for you? Like I think that a lot of that is kind of like unfortunately sci-fi from the 80s, 90s, and it's like.
There were certainly a lot of visionaries like Carl Sagan and others, who I think inspired so many people exactly because they had this existential hope. They pointed out that there is so much more awesomeness that we can make happen if we work for it. I think, and I hope that, again, people get a little bit shook out of their everyday habits and start thinking a little bit more about the bigger things as a result of this. And of this crisis here, because I think it's so easy otherwise to just make the same mistake I used to make when I was a little kid and think, well, I don't have to worry about the big questions because mommy and daddy have it all covered, and if they don't, well, there's the fire department and the cops and the government. And then gradually, of course, the older I got, I realized that actually mommy and daddy couldn't do everything themselves, and so there was the fire department and so on. And then gradually I realized that even all these top people in government and others, some of whom I've even met now in person, they're not at all these sort of omniscient, omnipotent, competent people I thought they were when I was a kid. And we're sort of on this spaceship Earth, hurling through the cosmos without really having a captain or really anyone with much of a plan. And if there was ever, I think of the world's response, especially in the West, to COVID-19 is kind of like George W. Bush's response to Hurricane Katrina was on a national scale. A lot of people thought just we had our act together more than we actually did. So maybe this can optimistically inspire people to put more effort into making sure we actually have our act together.
Yeah, I agree. I think, the emperor has no clothes on. We know that now. And, it's this moment where you're just like, oh man, there is no homunculus in the control tower. It's up to us, but maybe that's also a very good thing. Thank you so much, Max. Okay, Eri, I'm going to unmute you next. Welcome, Eri. It's really, really nice to meet you. What made you into the person who you are? What really inspires you for a positive long-term future?
Muting. Listen. Okay. It's great to be here. Awesome answers so far. I want to give a little bit of context. Allison, you mentioned Institute for the Future. It's an amazing organization where I was the research director for a long time, and that's where I learned how to think systematically about the future. And that really does give me hope. And that's birthed from seeing humans get through crises in the past and understanding that we have a clear way to understand the future and to solve for it. So I want to get more into that later. This is still just some context. How did I get to be the person that I am? And there's two initiatives that I want to talk about that I think are relevant. So number one, how I spent most of my time prior to the pandemic is with a company called Negative that my friend and colleague Tito Jankowski and I set up. We use CO2 that's been pulled out of the atmosphere and we use it to make products. And these are products for everyday people. And why do we do that? It's so that you can see climate action happen so that it's tangible. It's not something that you can ignore once you can see it. And I think there's so many ties to climate action and the pandemic that are really inspiring, but we have to hold on to it and we have to make actual systematic change with respect to this long-term threat in the ways that we've been able to in the short term with the pandemic. The other initiative I want to mention is super exciting. It's called COVID Accelerator. Again, my friend Tito Jankowski and I, we started this just less than 50 days ago. And the thing that inspired me for long-term action was the initiative to start COVID Accelerator. And that was a conversation with our friend Walter de Brouwer. He is the CEO at Doc.ai, company that's trying to revolutionize healthcare data. And he said, I've got 50 MIT-trained bioinformaticians that want to do something about COVID. And that's it. They don't know what to do. They're super well-trained, super smart. They have time. They want to do something. What do they do? So this is a problem that presents a super exciting opportunity. Like, how can we get the best talent in the world to start working on this in innovative ways? And we tried a few things, including doing a report. It didn't get much traction. We tried to do a mini hackathon, and it just wasn't enough for solutions to be worked out. So we started a community of interest around COVID with this question: can we move faster than a virus? And we had this challenge to the community: what can you build that scales in 2 weeks and saves lives? And now we've grown to a little more than 1,000 people, grassroots, who are working on active projects like pop-up test sites, like the Corona Care Card that helps support local businesses in a time of crisis. There is a new project helping first responders with mental health support. And we've seen these projects like evolve as the pandemic itself has evolved really quickly, been able to get traction, support, PR, in a really short amount of time. That was the moment. That was the moment that made me hopeful. And I'm going to finish up with what that relates to, and a note of maybe advice for everybody is that the best things that I've done in life came by nature of being an outsider. Being somebody who was an outsider looking in, especially to communities that were open to sharing. And by listening, like really listening and hearing people, solving for infrastructure problems, just solving basic stuff that you heard that people needed. And so use that superpower of being an outsider with a different perspective, because you're the ones that don't accept all of the frustrations, all of the like, this is super annoying. Why do we work this way? Why do we pay for scientific studies? Like, why can't we just get them for free? Little things like that, where people within the system, they just are burnt out, but they largely accept those. But by being an outsider, you can bring fresh eyes and say, like, that literally doesn't make sense. Let's do it differently.
All right, lovely. Thank you so much, Eri. Very actionable. Okay, and tomorrow actually we're going to have a panel on kind of like what, how can we champion the current kind of spirit of like, okay, let's just do it because it's the right thing to do. So I think, you know, like a few of the examples that you mentioned are definitely, I think, very good examples for that next session tomorrow as well. Okay, Anders, you up next.
Okay, yes, thank you so much. So here are three the small scenes that gave me my sunny disposition. First, as a 7-year-old kid, I was playing hide and seek with a friend, and I hid in the library of a house. So I was peeking behind the curtain and watching a lot of knickknacks on the desk, and I was wondering, what do they do? I want to know what they're for. And then I looked at the books and the other things in the room areas. I want to know everything in those books. I want to understand this room. Actually, I want to understand the entire world. And the next thought was, I better live for a very long time. A few years later, I was sitting on a bench outside my school. I was feeling rather down because some of the other kids had been teasing me about something nerdy I had been going on about. And then I had this realization. If I'm feeling bad, it's a kind of useless. Because either it's something I can go off and fix, in which case I should go off and fix it. Or I can't fix it, and in that case, my feeling bad is just bad. There is no real point to that. And then a few years later, at the Stockholm Municipal Library, though I was collecting books with interesting equations in the science area, and I had been looking through a thick book that had some awesome equations about a lot of astrophysics and really weird quantum mechanics, of which I didn't understand at all. And then I opened the last pages and read the last words. And it said, at this point, intelligent life will have acquired all the information that's logically possible to know, not just in this universe, but in all universes. And that is the end. I had found Barrow and Tipler's The Anthropic Cosmological Principle, which is a fantastic, awesome book. Especially, even though today we might complain a bit about the cosmology and things have moved on, it still is awesome because it shows we can do science about the far future. We can try to make a picture of where we fit in with the universe. And when the young nerdy Anders realized, whoa, I really want to get to the omega point, I started thinking backwards. Okay, so to get there, I need self-replicating space probes. For that, we probably need a lot of AI and we need space settlements. We need strong materials and better computer. I started to realize you can work backwards from that glorious and perhaps impossible vision and start seeing practical goals. One of the end goals was, okay, I probably should ace exams in school so I can get in whatever university I like. And I should probably read up way more on the physics shelf so I can understand the rest of it. But that's how I ended up here.
Oh, wow. I love this. Yeah, this is very lovely. Thank you so much for sharing, Anders. So now all kids go hide in someone's house and explore the libraries there. Okay, last one up, we have David Pearce, and I'm already going to share the question for the next round so the speakers can get up to speed. David, what did inspire you for the first time that more is possible?
Oh, good heavens. I feel bad because everyone else here is radiating such optimism and positivity, where I'm generally full of doom and gloom. Yeah, on a more positive note, yeah, I'm a third-generation vegetarian vegan, preoccupied by the problem of suffering, and I came to realize in my teens that what sounds a completely impossible utopian dream, namely a world without pain and suffering, is technically possible. And the risk of sounding like an optimist, yes, I think we're going to phase out the biology of suffering throughout the living world and replace it with gradients of intelligent bliss, not just ordinary human bliss, but bliss that is orders of magnitude richer than anything that's even physiologically feasible today. The first piece in the jigsaw for me was reading in some pop science book the discovery by Olds and Milner of what was then called the pleasure centers. They're not called the pleasure centers anymore, and how an intracranial self-stimulating rat, or for that matter, an intracranially self-stimulating human, would not experience tolerance that if given the opportunity to self-stimulate. Although I would stress I don't see our future in terms of wireheading, because wireheading destroys informational sensitivity. This was the first stage of my development in realizing that, yes, it is possible to have life without suffering. But yeah, of course, the obstacles are utterly daunting. I unfortunately think that centuries more of pain, misery, suffering, discontent, goodness knows what else lie ahead, although I would personally favor 100-year plan to phase out suffering throughout the living world, you know, universal access to pre-implantation, genetic screening, counseling, phasing out factory farms, slaughterhouses, getting rid of suffering in free-living non-humans via CRISPR-based synthetic gene drives, the lot. I fear my pleas will fall on deaf ears. So yes, I remain sadly pretty gloomy about most things.
All right, thank you. I mean, you know, to the hedonistic imperative, like one thing, you know, that we're going to talk about in the second week is, you know, the current loopholes that were opened by, you know, by COVID-19 interventions and how they may actually accelerate high impact science right now. So, you know, we may even get there faster. You're like, hopefully. All right, great. Next question up, and we're going to go with David up next. We have this kind of like quote that I picked from the Future of Humanity's website on existential hope, which is, if a catastrophe is an event which causes the loss of most expected value, a eucatastrophe is an event which causes there to be much more expected value than before. And so my question is, how can the current crisis be a eucatastrophe? So what beneficial paths for the future are available now that perhaps weren't available then? David, do you want to go for that?
Okay, well, I would like to think that this will lead to a revolution in our treatment of non-human animals, because a lot of people right now are feeling cooped up, what with lockdown and so forth. But imagine what it is like to be a factory farmed pig who can't even turn around. And pigs are akin to toddlers and small children. And yeah, ideally, and I stress the ideally, yes, as I said, if we were to shut factory farms and slaughterhouses and replace them by an initiative involving cultured meat and animal products, we could get rid of the greatest source of severe and readily avoidable suffering in the world. It would be extraordinarily cost effective, because imagine if instead of factory farming, slaughterhouses, governments had put funding into cultured meat and animal products, it would save in fact, it would save trillions of dollars. Goodness knows what the cost of COVID-19 is going to be. These zoonotic plagues would not happen if it weren't for the appalling way that we treat non-human animals. Whether it's viral pneumonia or bacterial pneumonia because of antibiotic resistance, essentially, yeah, it is a catastrophe both for humans and our victims if we continue systematically to abuse non-human animals in the way we do. Is it going to happen? I don't know.
If we make it so. All right, thank you so much, David. We're going to take David Eagleman next, and then Max. David, I'm going to unmute you. Wait, you're still muted. Okay, now you know.
Okay, great.
Yes,
yeah.
Yes.
The benefits that could come out of this, you know, first of all, globalization, just the recognition that many of the challenges we're facing are cross-border. It's useful to have this sort of thing once in a while. The second big benefit I see coming out of this is just that, you know, as a scientist, the fact that the world has turned to all the geeks to ask what to do next is very useful, because I'm a student of history, and in all previous pandemics, that hasn't been the general thing. Instead, people have turned to religious leaders and so on, as you might expect. But science has sort of been able to push that from the altar and say, look, here are the numbers, here are the facts on the ground. So that's super useful. The other thing is in 2010, I wrote a book called Why the Net Matters, which was about looking at the advent of this global communication system on the time scale of 10,000 years, like civilizations and why civilizations before us have fallen and so on. And, you know, one of the things that I argued for in the book was the need for businesses to really practice their telepresence plans and for medical centers to really build up their telemedicine plans and so on. And, you know, who knows if writing a book actually gets anyone to do anything, but that the benefit that I see coming out of this is that now everyone is thinking about these topics in a super useful way, and making stuff happen, often with some growing pains. But this is why this looks like a very promising eucatastrophic outcome from this.
Yeah, I mean, as we are currently just trying to figure it out online, but we are going to have a session in which we kind of like to think of like, now that we, given the fact that we need to get online now, how can we actually make this pleasant, and how can we maybe speed up the kind of like mind uploading and very, very creative scenarios that I think, you know, Anders, but also that you and Osh, for example, at the Neo Live event, you talked about fantastic scenarios. Could you give one glimpse of that? At Neo Live, you and Osh had an amazing conversation.
Yeah, I don't remember exactly what we talked about, but I suspect what we talked about is one of the companies that I spun off from my neuroscience lab is called Neosensory, and we use patterns of vibration on the skin to pass information in that way. And we can feed in all kinds of data streams that way. It's essentially the new channel for augmented reality of various sorts. And it may well be that eventually we can have something that's better than just this very low bandwidth, you know, talking and vision, but have a full haptic thing. So that's something we've been working on as well.
Yeah, very neat. All right, thank you. Okay, Max, what about you? What kind of eucatastrophic moments can you see from this?
I'm still muted. Can you unmute me?
Now you're on.
Now you're on.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks for unmuting me. If this were a smallpox epidemic going on right now, and you were self-isolating with your loved ones, and then for some reason you got infected with cowpox, right? You might think that's a bad thing because it's also a disease, but that would be a little eucatastrophe for you and your family, because then you become immune to smallpox, right? This was, in fact, the basis of the first vaccine against smallpox. And in the same way, you know, we are now living with technology levels high enough that we will soon have the potential to extinguish all life on Earth, right? And we can have a lot of globally catastrophic risks to think about: accidental nuclear war, unaligned AI, runaway climate change, and you name it. So if this is going to be a eucatastrophe, it's going to be like cowpox, you know, a smaller catastrophe that vaccinates us and makes it less likely we're going to succumb to the bigger ones. So I actually have not an answer here, but a question for all of you guys. What can we do? We in the effective altruism community, we as in the group of people in this call that like to think long-term about the future, what can we do to make sure that this becomes a eucatastrophe and not just another squandered opportunity to do things better? I think that when you ask yourself this question, we have to partly be kind of humble also and take this to be a wake-up call, not just for politicians and others, but for us in our community also. Because let's fail it, you know, we've failed really badly. I think many people and many scientists and researchers and thinkers thought that political leaders, world leaders, were going to listen to them more than they have in the past. I think many of us also thought that, you know, when push came to shove, the people in charge actually weren't quite as incompetent as we thought, and they were going to surprise us positively. I don't feel that that's either of those has happened. So I think this needs to be a wake-up call that actually it's incredibly valuable if we in this community can step up more. Like Jack Pearce was saying, right? This is not one of those things where bad things are going to happen. There's nothing we can do about it. So let's cheer up and not think about it. This is one of those situations where what we do can actually help a lot. And I would like to leave by just focusing this question about how we can make this be a eucatastrophe a little bit more on two areas. One is, how can we improve the messaging from our community community of researchers and thinkers who have a lot of good answers and advice, so that it actually has more impact in the world. I think we've failed so far. I think the Coca-Cola Corporation does much more professional and scientific messaging than our community does. So there's a lot of room for improvement there. And second, coming back to Alison Duttman's charge here for this call, how can we in our community help the world community articulate a really inspiring vision for the future that's globally acceptable? There are plenty of positive visions for the future that have catalyzed good things to happen in the past, right? So Anders and I grew up in Sweden, where the vision of a welfare state where the government pays for healthcare and college and so on actually caught on so well that the rest of the world, to a large extent, copied it, right? That worked. But today, the visions that get some people very excited in the US, and visions that get some people very excited in China and other places, seem so incompatible that we don't really have any vision that has any chance of being globally accepted as something that, yeah, we really like this vision for the future, because it's clear that we are all going to be better off. Americans better off, Chinese better off, Europeans better off, everyone better off. And I would encourage you all to really think hard about this question. To motivate action, right? People have to have a positive vision so they can see how they are going to come out ahead of this, and if they do this. And it's one thing to talk about, yeah, we need to collaborate more, but if we can have a positive vision where people see that if they collaborate more, then we're all around the planet, we're all going to win, because we're all going to get this awesome future. Then people will want to collaborate more. Then we're going to get that future.
I love that. Yes, it's a definitely one thing that we're hoping to get out of this, and it also has a lot of the Paretotopian potential narrative of like we could all win together, And I think one thing that actually a comment that stuck out to me from the collaboration Google Notes doc is, someone I think said, okay.
While you look for your Google Notes, I'll just chime in and add also that, we're currently kind of going in the opposite direction, right? Where if anything, the rift between the US and China is just getting more and more inflamed and ugly and aggressive, right? And fueled by politicians who feel caught with their pants down, wanting to pin blame for their failures on others. So it's really very, very valuable if we can help articulate positive visions so that we get people around the world pulling in the same direction instead of an opposite.
Well, yeah, that was actually like a next question that I want to get to, but maybe, as you and Eri and Anders are speaking, one thing, obviously one of the questions is like, what do we want to see more of? But also, what should we be on guard about? So, what are the specific things that we can already see occurring? Because you mentioned, for example, this, let's not squander this opportunity. And it may even be that we don't just squander it, but that things are actually going to be much more polarizing afterwards. So perhaps, I don't know if you want to say a few words more about that and on how to do that, but I'm also, laying it out there for Eri and Anders also to comment on as we get to them afterwards. What are specific things that you see that we should really be on guard about?
I think the one you just said there, getting into a new Cold War between the US and China, spilling over into a new arms race and artificial intelligence between the US and China. That's exactly the thing that people who've been worrying about unaligned AI, artificial general intelligence, have told us for years and years. That's the nightmare scenario that we have to avoid, getting into this race condition, where you have superpowers everyone cuts corners on safety just to sort of one up each other. And we're going with express speed in this direction. With the Future of Life Institute, we've tried very hard to counteract this by at least at the level of researchers going the opposite direction. So for example, the last Puerto Rico conference we were very excited that we had a lot of Chinese AI researchers. And we found that generally the researchers who are experts in the technology and think a lot about these things, they tend to get along much better across borders than the political leaders do. This was just the same during the Cold War, when scientists in the Soviet Union got along much better with scientists in the West than political leaders do. And that kind of second and third tier diplomacy hopefully can have a stabilizing effect to some extent. But what we've tried to do so far falls very, very, very far short, of course, of what needs to happen. And I'm mainly here today to listen to your ideas for what we can do to reverse this, because I'm quite convinced that just another out of control arms race, this time between the US and China, centered on AI rather than nukes, is just about the dumbest thing we could possibly do for our long-term future.
Agreed. And I think one thing that you mentioned is scientists collaborating, and Pugwash is always an example that, you know, really comes to mind there. I think that was quite illuminating. All right, Eri, I'm going to unmute you.
All right, great answers. And I love that Max is pushing us to think about how do we actually make this a eucatastrophe. And that links to one of the points I wanted to make is that futures thinking itself will change. And we have historical precedent for this. One example I like a lot is that we didn't always have scenario planning, meaning we didn't always imagine many different outcomes for the future, alternative visions. This came about mostly in response to the 1979 Iranian oil crisis, when expectations were not met. So economic forecasting was the primary way you made decisions back then. So past demand indicated future demand. And it was that simple, really, but it was a shock to the entire industry, and it demanded that new ways of thinking about the future be created. And so scenario planning took place, led by Pierre Wack at the Royal Dutch Shell Oil Company shortly after, and it's proliferated throughout industry and throughout many organizations that I've worked with. And we always need better models for thinking about the future. And so, like, as Max was provoking us, I think this is our opportunity to create new models for thinking. And I'd want to hear David Eagleman's thoughts on this. So my non-neuroscientist thoughts are that the pandemic is creating new mental models in us. So we have different expectations for what can happen and how we can all respond. And what does that do to us fundamentally? How does that change the way that we think? Not just about a crisis, but it changes what we expect of our leaders, of scientific progress, of the historic openness that we see. And I also want to be like him and point to some other history that I think is quite helpful, at least for me, in staying hopeful and keeping action oriented. And this comes by way of Donald McNeil. He's a really great science and health reporter at the New York Times. I encourage you to check out his work. But he talked about how we were able to be resilient after World War I and World War II. So we all remember the Spanish influenza and World War I. And out of that came the Roaring 20s. And after World War II, we experienced massive economic resurgence. And it shaped the way that a lot of the industry that we have today is. I think it's pretty clear due to economic wealth disparities, trade wars, and so on and so on. Like, we need new models again for the ways that we operate with different systems, not just different governments. And what came after World War II is people demanded stuff. So it's not just about passively sitting back and saying that things are going to be better, but people demanded things like state-sponsored mortgages, better healthcare, and these things actually were created because of people's demands. And the last bit there is it gives people an appreciation of the small things. You know, I don't know what that means or how that scales, but you appreciate things and you have a healthy understanding of what can go wrong. And maybe you dive into the pessimism, but there's also the opportunity to dive into the optimism and making things happen. I think on another day, I'd love to have longer conversations with you all about what are the changes to the future of work and to science itself. But I'm going to stop there.
All right. Well, you should definitely join our science session, and please join also our virtual education and work session. And David, do you want to answer Eri's question?
Yeah, I'll only take 15 seconds here. By the way, aside from the Roaring '20s, it's also considered by historians that the Renaissance was a direct result of the Black Plague. And in answer to the thing you'd mentioned, it's exactly right. The reason we have an internal model is so that we can predict, so that we can put together possible futures. And so what happens when that gets shaken up is that we can imagine possible futures. We can have expectations that are quite different. So that's all I'll say, so we can get to the other speakers.
Thank you. Oops. I'm just opening up a video because Tyler Alterman actually did a salon that was on the Renaissance. The Renaissance came from the plague. We had him for a sanity preserver, and in that we kind of like did future scenarios in which what kind of new Renaissance, and Renaissance 2.0 sounds so like banal, but like what kind of like new movements could arise from this current crisis. So I encourage you to check out the video. I just posted it in there, and yeah, it was good fun. Thank you. Okay, Anders, you're up next. Wait until I unmute you.
Okay, now I can speak. Yeah, so what has become possible? I think the really unique thing about the present moment is that we actually have a shared global moment in a very real sense. So while on one hand we become very aware of the limitations and the powers of nationalism, at the same time we're also very interconnected. So you have these fascinating paradoxes of my dinner table guests who are now gone virtual, pointing out we should all call our friends who live in China because they're going stir crazy because they have been already in quarantine much longer than us. So you get an interesting humanization. A lot of us are experiencing that moment where, oh, I'm not feeling so good, but others are also not feeling so good and we can talk about it. In fact, quite a lot of celebrities, whether academic or normal celebrities, have also shown a much more everyday perspective. Partially, of course, because we can't get the film crew to make them up at home, etc. I think that is actually more powerful than it sounds. And I think one can mine this humanization for quite a bit. Because, yeah, we're all in it together. It's a trite message, but it's actually quite important to point out the shared humanity, because this is a very effective antidote towards the more naturalistic ideas who say, no, we should just close our borders around ourselves and be safe against everybody else. Yeah, but we need the others. We need their products, and actually many of them are our friends or active online together with us. Another important thing that has become possible is to bend and break rules. Not to the extent that the cliche that people imagine, disaster leads to mass panic and everybody rioting in the street, but rather that, those really bureaucratic rules about what products you may use in a hospital, if you're actually running out of equipment, then you're going to take what you can get. Private people have realized that, I can actually supply the hospital if they really need it. The maker movement has really demonstrated that they can do useful things. And even though we're not making breathing apparatus, many of them are making aprons and protective masks. That's important and good enough. And I think we can build on this. I think there is a lot of goodwill being established and the recognition that in a situation of crisis, asking for permission will kill people. You actually need to make decisions and bend it. There are probably going to be a lot of silly lawsuits afterwards. So we might want to make sure that we fund defense teams and make sure that we get on the book that, in a crisis, you should help, even though you might not have a medical license, even though you might not fit in exactly. A final point is what could go wrong? Where are the dangerous things? So the obvious thing is, of course, nationalism. Us versus them is a natural response when things turn dark. But I'm a bit more worried actually about disappointment and despair. So my dad, he was very afraid of me being disappointed. So he typically tried to make me not do things because I could be disappointed because it wasn't as good as I imagined. Fortunately, I didn't listen to him. And indeed, I was disappointed a fair number of times. But I also realized that's not so bad. It's much better to be occasionally disappointed than actually not do anything. But many people are, of course, going to be disappointed about, for example, vaccine trials not working out or the quarantines not lifted. We need to find ways of handling that. And especially in our culture, I think we have become slightly bad at disappointment because we expect to be satisfied instantly now. And despair might also be an important thing. The myth of mass panic is all based on the idea that people, as soon as something bad happens, they lose all moral inhibitions and riot. That doesn't happen. People behave well in disasters. When they start misbehaving is when they actually lose hope. It's extremely important to have hope, to show that, yep, we might be still in for the long haul, but there is a dawn coming, even though it's way further off than we would wish it. We might want to figure out ways of getting there, but we're getting there, 1 second at a time. Actually having that sense that you can ward off despair together, that you can nurture hope, and that it's actually, from a public health and safety perspective, rather important to have a hopeful civilization. I think that's a really important realization that we might also afterwards get governments to realize that, yeah, we better have visions. We better have something that can nurture hope for a better future.
Thank you so much. That was very uplifting. We're now exactly at noon. Thank you so much to the speakers. Optionally, if you want to close out with, where do you want to be in 100 years plus? What can someone do right now to get there? Please raise your hand and I'll count on you. Yes, Anders. Yeah. Do you want to say where do you want to? So the question is like, where do you want to be 100 years from now? But then also very specifically, what can someone do right now? Okay. Oh, wait. Oh my God, I actually didn't unmute you. Now we go.
Well, so the thing is, we probably need to develop a global pandemic defense system. That's dead obvious. And it's also pretty obvious that current international institutions are not up to it. So in some sense, the critique of the World Health Organization is valid. It's just that it's right now coming from a really wrong direction. And typical discussions just get very angry and not constructive. So what we can do right now is starting to hatch ideas for, so what would be better than WHO? What would be way better? And every time somebody starts harassing or haranguing about the WHO not being good enough or biased because of Chinese money or something else, bring up, so here is an idea for something better. Can you beat that? And then we get engaged in a race of optimistic ideas.
I like it. Great. Competition for optimism. Anyone else would like to do a close out? Just raise your hand in the Zoom. Yes, Eri.
Great, I love that answer. And I want to build on top of it that, all signs point to better monitoring and in some cases, enforced monitoring. So I think our need will be to have better monitoring of disease, of people's locations, so we can do contact tracing while managing privacy rights. So thinking forward about potential threats to people that go beyond just biological. And it's something we're coping with now since technology was built without long-term in mind. So this is our chance to build that pandemic monitoring system, right? And it includes watching for outbreaks in animals and knowing our relationships to one another. Really positive stuff could come out of knowing our relationships as well. And last point is I hope that we develop a healthy respect for biology and nature, and we begin building more with nature in mind and understanding the impacts that we have to these global systems, that we are part of an ecosystem, a set of them, and not just creatures that can engineer our way out of anything.
All right, I love it. On the contact tracing one, we actually have a focus group on that later in the weeks. Anyone else would like to go with the last point? I want to be very mindful of your time, but also wanting to definitely not cut you short if you would like to have a last moment. If so, raise your hand. David, you would like to go? Wait.
Yeah. Yes. I think, yeah, we need to make the transition to a civilization that is geared to helping sentient beings rather than harming them. So, yeah, absolutely basic. Shut outlaw factory farms, slaughterhouses. In terms of the human population, three things, I think, what is needed. Universal basic income, absolute precondition of any kind of civilized society. I mean, I normally sound like some kind of crude genetic determinist, but I'm not. So we need universal basic income. We need guaranteed housing, accommodation. It's crazy that one has hundreds of thousands of homeless people in the USA, for example, and all these unoccupied hotel rooms. I mean, in the UK, the government has finally instructed councils that all homeless people should have guaranteed accommodation. But it's crazy. It shouldn't take a pandemic to do this. And third, yes, universal access to healthcare, medical care that is free at the point of delivery. Absolute precondition of a civilized society. Because although I have a lot of libertarian instincts, sadly, essentially the Western liberal democracies have failed. Compare something like Vietnam, low-income country, porous borders with China, 0 deaths, under 300 cases. Now, sure, we wouldn't want a Leninist system and a communist party directing our lives, but they have succeeded and we have failed. And no talk in Vietnam of herd immunity, of leaving the old to their fate or anything. Whereas sadly, hundreds of thousands of Americans are going to die. And we don't know the figure yet for the UK, perhaps 60,000 people in the UK, and it doesn't have to be that way. Okay, right. Finally, what would I like the world to be 100 years from now? Well, you can probably guess what I'm going to say. And in a different branch of the multiverse, I will be delivering a talk to the UN, haranguing them on their responsibilities for a blueprint to phase out suffering throughout the living world. However, rather low amplitude branch of the universal wave function, so I will pass on the baton now to the next panelist.
Thank you. We have only Max to go. Max, do you want to say a few last words? Or... Oh, wait. Okay.
And that's what I had to say.
Okay, we just heard that's what I had to say because I muted you too late. Could you say it one more time?
Yeah, that was just a joke. I completely agree with what everybody else said. So I just want to ultra briefly say I think in difficult times, it's more important than ever to remember how much potential we have as a species, how much potential life has. You know, our universe has spent most of the past 13.8 billion years just being dead and boring with no positive experiences, whatsoever. And now it's come alive. And we, as far as we're the first civilization we know of, and maybe the only one in our observable universe that has the potential to really make a difference and make the billions of years ahead be full of life and awesome experiences. And we also have the potential to wipe out. So I think we must never lose sight of this bigger picture, that what we do here in our lifetime on this little planet might make all the difference, not just for us, but for our cosmos. And this is something that very much motivates me to get up in the morning and work really hard to make a difference. I hope it motivates you too.
Yeah, we've made it so far. Let's keep on going. And I welcome everyone to check out Life 3.0. I think Max lays out very specific paths in which we could be headed, and it's really fantastic and quite mind-opening. All right. Hey, thank you so much for going over time. I thought this was a really incredible kind of like stop. I really, really, really thank you. This was, this was really quite fantastic. Thank you all for making time. Thank you to everyone else who joined. I'm going to say an official goodbye now, and we'll share the video and we'll share the notes. For those who want to stay on, we're going to do a little bit more of like interactive sharing. But for now, I just want to say thank you. This was a fantastic kickoff for this event, and I'm hoping to see many of you tomorrow morning at 11 a.m. where we're going to talk about how can we champion the emerging culture of civic responsibility that we see? How can we not ask for permission? How can we do the right thing because it's the right thing? All right, so thank you to everyone who joined. I'm going to stay on for a little longer, but to everyone who has appointments, bye-bye. It was incredibly lovely to have you. Thanks.
Thank you for putting it on.
Thanks. All right, I'm going to wave to the others. All right, so let's see. So for everyone who's still here, like the last salons that we used to have were always like super interactive. Everyone was sharing. Then we had a few Zoom bombers. So this is why I'm muting people now. But I think we'll figure something out in the long run. But for everyone who's still here and would like to go, I don't know, we collected on the Foresight Online Salon doc, and this is a total experiment. I'm going to share my screen again. So on the Foresight document, we collected under Collaborate. You guys basically signed up on the collaborative sheet, and maybe Lou can share the link again. And on the collaborative spreadsheet, you not only put in your name, but you also put in affiliation, email, link to relevant work. And please, if you haven't done so, please do so. But you also put in a bit of hope. So this is something, an idea, an art piece, a poem, a music, or other bits of hope that really inspire you for positive long-term futures and that you would like to take into a new tomorrow. So my question to you here is, and please use the chat for that, who here have put something in there that they would like to share? Please say so in the chat. Just say me, and then there's the HiveMind spreadsheet. Okay. We had, I think Anders shared something, and Anders is still here. Anders, if I could unmute you, maybe you'd like to go first, and then wait, I'm gonna unmute you first. Super. Okay, you're unmuted. Do you want to go first, maybe, and then we'll go along?
Sure. So my little piece of hope was a painting by Thomas Cole. He's most famous for his paintings of a cycle of civilization that shows the kind of almost cliche idea about what a civilization is like, kind of starting in the pastoral state and growing to a mighty empire, and then barbarians come, and then these beautiful ruins. But this other painting, it's the dream of the architect. So on a gigantic pedestal, the architect is kind of sitting there watching his dream. And it's the greatest hits of all civilization when it comes to architecture. Now, I think there is something very funny about this, because architecture seems to move us almost suspiciously well, which we should care way more about people. And maybe many people do that much more. But quite often as a symbol of civilization, what we try to aspire to, something bigger than ourselves, yet that is strongly linked to the human spirit. Architecture is such the big deal. So I love having that as a picture of this is what we aspire to, or something even better. Yes, it's old-fashioned. There are church steeples and pyramids, and we might want to have spacecraft and Dyson spheres instead, but there is still something very lovely about it. Also how we're kind of blending in with organic forms, with nature. We can do that too. Architecture doesn't have to be outside nature. In fact, brutalist buildings look really good in tropical jungles.
Oh man, I love it. I do think that architecture movements were always on the frontier, I think, of developing ideas there. We had Brian Muhia, who also messaged me. Wait, Brian, let me unmute you. And if you have the piece handy, you can even screen share it. I'm going to unmute you now. Brian, it's so nice to see you again.
Hi everyone. So it's really amazing to be a part of this community. Like I've learned so much over time, and it's really amazing to be participating online. I normally wouldn't be able to do that since I'm based in Nairobi. That's where I live and work. And what I want to share is sort of an idea of what we might want to do is like here right now when we're talking to each other, we are sharing our voices. Like we are listening and then we're sharing our voices and we get a chance to spend time in someone else's soundscape in a way. Like we just listen and we understand what they're talking about and then we can analyze what they're saying. So what I thought to do is try and experiment with a project I'm running right now. If I can share the screen, we try work on that.
Wait, Brian, I have to make you co-host. 1 second.
Okay.
And you should be able to share now.
All right, just a sec.
Right. And next one up, we have Mindy and Harrison. So please prepare your screen share if you'd like. Okay, Brian.
All right. So, where am I? Can you see our website, Sound on Nairobi? Right? Cool.
Well, I can see the LiveWire website.
LiveWire. Oh, snap! I think I'm sharing the wrong screen. Sorry.
It's like this looks interesting. Probably also hopeful.
Close it, and then I'll open another tab. So the idea here is because we have access to soundscapes all over the world, right? Since we are all wherever we are, we can spread the idea of sharing the soundscape of our areas. Like whenever you take a walk outside, whenever you feel like you want to spend some time outside outdoors doing whatever it is you're doing, make a recording or something and then upload it to this website. And you can also spend time on the archive itself. The main idea of this project is to be a very, very long-term archive of the soundscapes of my home city. Right? We'd like it to last as long as the long Now Foundation, if that's a good metric. And the idea is you want to use this as a community resource so that people can download and re-record and remix their recordings and use them in their films and audio recordings and whatever. So if you go to this site, you can listen to recordings of people made in the last 6 months since September. And we're working on, we're reopening the archive for recordings for people to participate over the next 6 months. And basically throughout the pandemic, we would like to see what the differences are. So if you can participate, you're not in Nairobi, but you'll be community members. I'm inviting the Foresight community to participate in this. You can even use your voice if you want. You can speak into the recording to say whatever it is you imagine and what you would like to do, the recording, what the kind of hope you would like to spread in the world. It'll be anonymous if you but if you want to mention it, you can say here, and then we keep track of the updates. Yeah, so that's what I wanted to share. I hope you can find some use for it, and then hopefully we'll find build a bigger community for it.
Brian, I love it. You have to talk to Brewster Kale at the Internet Archive about it because you know I don't know if you do already, but if not, I'll put you two in contact. This is fantastic. I love it. Okay. All right, thank you. I'm going to mute you, and next one up we have Mindy. Mindy, I'm going to unmute you now, and I'm going to make you co-host, so you are now unmuted. Mindy, what do you have to share? And I'm going to make you co-host so you can.
Oh, thank you. Hello, everyone. So yeah, I'm very glad to see so many familiar faces, and I had actually here written in the bit of hope that I would like to to take into the future the wonderful friends from this timeline and the virtual world, like the second life, but with many orders of magnitude larger and more fun, with computational miracles fueled by computational universes like cellular automata, but much more abstract. So I didn't share my screen, but let me, I don't know, I could share a screen, but I don't know if you have been following the work of Stefan Wolfram, the creator of Wolfram Alpha and Mathematica, but basically there is the concept of the, let's say, cellular automata or hypergraph rewriting rules, which actually are just simple rules that when repeatedly applied can generate actually are arbitrarily complex patterns. And so basically I imagine that exploring those would be a lot of fun, or generating ever evolving worlds, let's say, based on those would be a lot of fun. And having friends when I'm familiar in this universe and this timeline together would be so much more, even much more fun to explore all that. So just
I love it.
yeah, and
so
I added and I added the link there to a piece of writing by myself. I can share a screen. Okay. Where is this? Where is this?
It should be below. There's a green share button.
Yeah, but if I share, I see the whiteboard.
Oh, then you can see different ones. You can use different screening options. But one thing that I would recommend you do is, could you please, in the collaboration tab on the spreadsheet, if you already signed up there, then also link to both of those pieces from that collaboration spreadsheet, please. Then people can follow up with you directly. Just they can search for your name.
You mean the new collaboration spreadsheet on the Monday or the foresight?
Yeah, the collaboration spreadsheet on the Monday. I'm going to share it again here in the meeting.
Yeah,
that one. Sign up there and put the two links in, and then people can follow up, because this video will be published, so people know that you're doing this.
Sure. Yeah, I will do that on this spreadsheet. Okay, so let me share the screen. Maybe let me actually share just the link, because the link is what I wanted to share over the screen. But just
okay, great. Thank you so much. Then I encourage people to check out the link to your own writing. I'm very excited about that. And please add it also to the collaborations spreadsheet. Do you want to say the title of the writing?
Yes, the title is Escaping Black Hole Together. So you can imagine the world as actually time and the current moment of now as a sort of event horizon. Anything that is not copied over to the next moment of now actually stays in the past, and you could say it dies, right? So it passes through the current slice of moment of now and goes to the past, so it kind of disappears. But there are many ways that we had actually that had allowed information to evolve into the future, from the written communication to storage disks and to all kind of communication technologies. And actually, there's a set of ideas that I think that are promising that could allow us basically have enjoy the differences and inquisitiveness while focusing on creating new substrates for helping each other's cultures to survive and thrive. So I've shared the link directly now on the chat, so you can just have a read.
Awesome, I love it. You have a very, I think, visual way in which you could, in which you talk about ideas. Very eloquent. Thank you so much. Okay, great. I think, honestly, I think one thing that we need is good metaphors, right? If we want to communicate better, as Max said, we need good metaphors. Bye, Anders. Bye, Anders. We're waving to you. Okay, great. Next one up, we have Harrison here. Harrison, let me find you and let me unmute you. And if you have something that you'd like to share, I'm going to allow you. I'm going to make you co-host so you can share your screen.
I'm using my phone because my internet access here isn't that great, but I'll share 2 screens with you from my computer here to show you some of the projects I work on. I'm an artist and I'm trying to work in the field of making sure that artists' rights are upheld during this time and that they're able to work with reciprocity within different systems. I mentioned in the chat trying to produce positive thought promotion and trying to change the paradigm of socially commodifying positive thoughts to people. One of the projects that I'm doing physically is that the area that I'm in Connecticut is there's a lot of retirees. There's a lot of people that are at risk. So what I've been doing is I've been volunteering through a website that I created called context.co. It's contecht.co. What we do is I act as an intermediary between groups and different at-risk areas like grocery stores, Walmart, also as taxi, just for people within my area that don't want to come into contact with other people. I thought of the idea because the gig economy has to change its complete foundation from having randomly assigned workers to having somebody that that you know of and is more local. You can find out more about it on context.co. The other thing that I'm doing is I started a website called brightfuturism.com, and Allison, looking at existential hope, it's really interesting because we were kind of working in a similar fashion. I was trying to collect positive thoughts about the future and trying to collect, people's thoughts about art in general. Most of this is all my artwork at the moment, but I was collecting thoughts and people's ideas about the future of art and how it can help different systems grow into this renaissance that we're talking about. And just trying to inspire other individuals through action and through art in some interesting way to think differently. So those are the projects that I'm working on right now. Contact.co is just myself and another group from Rhode Island right now that are volunteering with old folks mostly and families that are worried that they might be at risk. We have zero contact with the individuals we just deliver groceries to and from areas. If they need to be transported to the hospital or if they need to be transported to other locations or to see friends, we do that as well. But we have them in the backseat. We maintain the CDC guidelines. And it's interesting because Anders mentioned it as well, that if there's something that you can do that may not be strictly legal or you might not be a professional in doing those kinds of things, is if you can instill trust in your consumer and be able to have an offset of gratitude from that consumer while maintaining your safety and the safety for your consumers, that's something that I'm hopeful will carry forward as new initiatives into the future.
Oh man, you are so right. First of all, I love the website and my existential hope. I had a piece of art, like a section on art on there, but that was always, it's just not my focus. So that was always a little sad. And then secondly, to your thought, tomorrow we're going to talk a lot about how can we just actually empower people to do the right thing right now. And one thing that we're going to speak about there is Mark Miller, who's proposing to do a legal defense fund for people that either violated patent law or that did other things that were the right thing to do, but that are not strictly speaking legal, or that are at least more difficult or or gray areas. So this is just a good incentive tool to actually inspire people to do the right thing. If it's possible. So thank you so much, Harrison. Okay, with that being said, I want to thank all of you. Really, quite from the bottom of my heart, I thought that was a very, very, very uplifting first session. Thank you so much, Lou, for stewarding the whole conversation here. I'm just catching up on the chat. It looks insane. So really cool. Thank you all. We're going to publish the video, and I think Lou posted all of the different ways in which what you should be doing right now to stay up to date. But again, really the Google group is coordination point number 1. And we're gonna just learn by doing and evolve out of this. And we're gonna iterate fast. Tomorrow's the second one, and I can't wait to see many of you there. And tomorrow we're gonna talk about, again at 11 a.m. PT, how can we champion the emerging culture of civic responsibility and people stepping up ethically to do the right thing? We're going to have Mark Miller on the Legal Defense Fund that I mentioned. We're going to have Loretta, she's from Virgin, but she's here in a different capacity. And we're going to have Tia Kansara from Replenish Earth. And I think we're going to have someone from the EFF who's going to talk a little bit about civic liberties and what we can do legally to defend them and to allow people to actually step up. Okay, cool. So thank you so much for this crazy first day. And I see you tomorrow for the next part of the workshop. I do want to encourage you all, the notes that we used for today, they aren't only supposed to be there as an introduction for the salon, but we're actually trying to have a report published. So if you feel like this session inspired you and you want to contribute to a report, then take a look at the notes and see if you would feel inspired to turn those into a paragraph, including with the recording that we have, so that we can have like one kind of like collected knowledge doc that comes out of this thing, which people can refer to. Anyway, this is all for now. Thank you so much. See many of you tomorrow and have a lovely Monday. Bye.